China tells the UK to keep its hands off Hong Kong as a diplomatic row intensifies. It follows violent scenes on Monday when demonstrators smashed their way into Parliament amid fears Beijing is tightening its grip on the territory. China's ambassador is summoned to the Foreign Office in London after a war of words over Britain's backing for the Hong Kong protesters.
The UK government chose to stand on the wrong side. It has made inappropriate remarks.
We'll be asking what the diplomatic consequences could be also tonight. Obesity overtakes smoking as the cause of some of the most common kinds of cancer. Millions are warned their weight puts them at risk. Detectives say a heavily pregnant woman stabbed to death in London at the weekend had been subjected to a sustained and vicious attack. Her baby son died this morning. A big boost to Britain's film and TV industry as the American giant Netflix opens a new base at Surrey's world-famous Shepperton Studios. A place in the World Cup semi-finals for England after a sensational catch from Jos Buttler helps them thrash New Zealand. And a new Wimbledon star, 15-year-old American teen sensation Coco Gauff breezes into the third round of Wimbledon after knocking out a former semi-finalist.
And coming up on Sports Day on BBC News, Novak Djokovic looks imperious at Wimbledon. The defending champion cruises into the next round. Tennis action on the way.
Good evening. China and Britain have become embroiled in a heated war of words over the demonstrations in Hong Kong. It's after the Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, warned of serious consequences for China if the rights of people living in the territory were infringed. Today, Beijing accused Britain of indulging in colonial-era fantasies. China's ambassador to the UK was summoned to the Foreign Office after he warned the government it should seriously reflect on the consequences of its inappropriate words and actions. Here's our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale.
The aftermath of an invasion. This was Hong Kong's parliament today, where they were beginning to clear up the mess left by protesters on Monday. For many pro-democracy campaigners, their demonstration was peaceful. But for some, it was violent, forcing their way into the Legislative Council, where they wrought substantial damage. Damage that also had diplomatic consequences in London.
The UK government chose to stand on the wrong side. It has made inappropriate remarks.
China's ambassador said Britain's support for the demonstrations was wrong, disappointing and hypocritical. It had damaged UK-China relations.
We strongly condemn and oppose the gross interference in Hong Kong affairs and China's internal affairs by the British side. I would call them to hands off Hong Kong.
What upset the ambassador was the warning from the Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, that there would be serious consequences if China diluted Hong Kong's freedoms. And the promise from Boris Johnson that he would back the demonstrators every inch of the way. The row centres on the joint declaration agreed by Britain and China in 1984 that in future Hong Kong should retain some autonomy and freedom. This meant that after the handover in 1997, Hong Kong would exist under a so-called one country, two systems policy. Britain thinks that until the declaration expires in 2047, Hong Kong should keep its freedom. But China says the treaty is now just an historical document. Theresa May said she'd been shocked by the violence, but emphasised that the majority had marched peacefully and lawfully.
And it's vital that Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy and the rights and freedoms set down in the Sino-British Joint Declaration are respected. I have raised my concerns directly with Chinese leaders, as has my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, and other ministers, and we will continue to do so.
Jeremy Hunt did that in a tweet, telling the Chinese government that good relations between countries are based on mutual respect and honouring the legally binding agreements between them. He also summoned the Chinese ambassador to the Foreign Office, where he was told by Britain's top diplomat that what he had said was both unacceptable and inaccurate. It's rare for the Chinese embassy to hold a news conference. It's even rarer for ambassadors to be so outspoken. The question now is whether this war of words escalates and causes lasting damage to Britain's relations with China. James Landell, BBC News.
Let's talk to our China correspondent. John Sudworth is in Beijing, and that is the question. How serious could the consequences of this become?
Well, Sophie, we are, of course, meant to be in the middle of a golden era, a phrase coined in 2015 by the Cameron government. Now, some people may still see some signs of that. There was the £500 million trade deal signed last month. But there's a sense, of course, in which that sort of talk has never quite matched the reality, that the UK and China often don't share the same values on issues like Hong Kong. That said, the pushback this time has been unusual. The rhetoric is growing increasingly heated. The latest from the Chinese Foreign Ministry here in Beijing, accusing Jeremy Hunt of basking in past colonial glories. And I think there's a glimpse in that China senses the balance of power is shifting, and also perhaps a certain advantage. It is more than capable of sending countries with which it disagrees into the diplomatic and economic deep freeze. And it knows that it is up near the top of the UK wish list for a post-Brexit trade deal.
Sudworth in Beijing, thank you. Obesity now causes more cases of some cancers than smoking. The charity Cancer Research UK says bowel, kidney, ovarian and liver cancers are all more likely to have been caused by being overweight than by smoking tobacco. The number of obese adults in Britain has risen dramatically over the past 2 decades to around 15 million people, while the number of smokers has fallen sharply to 6 million. Our health editor Hugh Pym has more.
You've got to be obese to join this football club. The goal is to lose weight, and many of the players are doing well. They knew things had to change because their health was at risk.
You know, the stress of working, I think the stress of home life, the stress of everything you've got. And what happens, you sort of lose sight of yourself and you just comfort eat.
I moved for a physical job into an office just after an accident with my shoulder, and basically just piled it on.
Working long hours, it was just easier to grab quick snacks, you know, chips, burgers, to make it quick.
Today, an advertising campaign from Cancer Research had new health warnings stating that obesity now causes more cases of some cancers in the UK than smoking. They are kidney, liver, ovarian and bowel cancer. There are 42,000 new cases of bowel cancer per year. Of those, according to the research, obesity caused 4,800 and smoking 2,900. The link between obesity and cancer is because fat cells make extra hormones which tell cells to divide more often, increasing the cancer risk. So what's being done to tackle obesity? A tax on sugary drinks was introduced last year. As a result, manufacturers cut the sugar content of many products. The government at Westminster unveiled a plan to target food advertising, but campaigners say progress with that strategy has been slow.
It helped change the environment we live in, such as a 9 p.m. watershed on junk food adverts on TV and restricting things like buy one get one free on biscuits in supermarkets. But a year later, we've had lots of talk, lots of consultations, but very little action.
So what about future generations? These children at the Windley Leisure Centre in Sutton Coldfield today were doing their bit to keep fit and stay healthy. But their parents and grandparents say, however hard they try, it's difficult to do the right thing when it comes to food.
It's easier to access junk food than it is the quality stuff. And so, you know, and children are more inclined to go for that kind of food as well.
I think they've tried to take sugar out of a lot of foods, and salt especially, but there's a long way to go, I think.
Helping this generation grow up and make the right choices to avoid health risks is both a challenge and an opportunity. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
The baby boy of a heavily pregnant woman who was stabbed to death at her South London home has died 4 days after being delivered by paramedics. Kelly Mary Favrell was 8 months pregnant when she was killed. Police have now released footage of a man seen running away from the scene. They say her family were woken by her screams. Our correspondent Sarah Campbell reports.
It's just after 3 o'clock on Saturday morning. CCTV captures a man walking in the direction of Kelly Mary Favrell's house. Who is he? And why, shortly afterwards, is the same man, according to the police, seen running along the street? Minutes later, the emergency services were called to Kelly's address.
Kelly was the victim of a sustained and vicious attack which has taken place in her own bedroom. Her bedroom was in the family home. It was on the ground floor. There were no witnesses to the incident. The family were alerted just before 3:30 in the morning by the sound of screams, which was clearly Kelly.
Kelly was 8 months pregnant when she was stabbed to death. Her baby son, who the family named Riley, survived in hospital after paramedics managed to deliver him by emergency C-section, but died this morning. Outside their home, friends and neighbours have left soft toys and flowers in tribute to Kelly and Riley.
I think everybody is so shocked. You know, it's just beyond. It is beyond how somebody could do that, you know, to another human being, but, you know, an 8-month pregnant woman.
Forensics officers have spent the day examining the family home. 2 men, one aged 37 and another aged 29, were arrested at the weekend on suspicion of murder. Both have been released. Neither has been charged.
Kelly's bedroom was at the rear of the house, and the police say there was no sign of forced entry, but that it was a hot night and windows may have been left open. By the time Kelly's sister found her with fatal injuries, whoever had attacked her had already gone.
In the Commons today, the local MP said the killing showed the government wasn't doing enough to tackle knife crime.
If the government has been acting on knife crime, it isn't working. So what further action will the Prime Minister now take to stop the terrifying increase in the use of knives on our streets?
We are taking action in a number of ways. We will continue to work with the Mayor of London on the action that can be taken across London on this issue.
Many here are struggling to comprehend the stabbing of a heavily pregnant woman and the death of her baby. Sarah Campbell, BBC News, Thornton Heath.
2 rail workers have died after being hit by a passenger train in South Wales. Police say the men who were wearing ear defenders couldn't hear the train approaching. The incident took place just outside Port Talbot along the main line to London. From there, our Wales correspondent Sian Lloyd reports.
The spot where 2 local rail workers lost their lives when they were hit by a train they couldn't hear coming. Paramedics were called and a 3rd worker was treated for shock. Inside the train, passengers waited. 4 hours later, the 180 people on board were allowed to leave and taken away on buses to a nearby station.
We never know, do we, when we leave the house, whether we're coming home. But the poor people that got killed, that's worse than being inconvenienced, isn't it?
The first thoughts have to be to the family of the deceased and the other person who was injured, and equally, I must say, to the driver.
This is the main line between Swansea and London. The train had not long left Port Talbot when the accident happened just before 10 o'clock this morning, in conditions very much like this. Good visibility and dry weather. Questions are being asked about how this tragedy happened. The Rail Workers Union, the RMT, has called on Network Rail to suspend similar works while an investigation is carried out here. The company says it will cooperate fully with the inquiry, which has already begun.
We have a number of officers who remain in the area who continue to work alongside the Rail Accident Investigation Branch to understand the full circumstances of what happened in the moments before this incredibly sad, fatal collision.
Tonight, the train may have been driven away, but the work to find out what went wrong continues. Sian Lloyd, BBC News, Port Talbot.
A man accused of lying about the existence of a VIP paedophile ring has repeated his claims in court that he was raped by a former head of the British Army and by Jimmy Savile. Police launched a £2 million investigation after Carl Beach said he was one of several children sexually abused by a group that included leading figures from the British establishment. He denies 12 charges of perverting the course of justice and 1 of fraud. Postal ballot papers will be sent to around 160,000 Conservative Party members at the end of this week so that they can choose the next Prime Minister. Will it be Boris Johnson or Jeremy Hunt? Our political editor Laura Kunsberg has been to Canterbury, which the Conservatives held for decades until 2017, to find out who Tory party voters there are planning to pick.
In sunny gardens, pubs, homes or meeting halls, Tory members gather to choose who to send to Downing Street. It's their decision, and soon.
The ballot papers are going to go out on Friday. Most people are going to reply quickly, and so you could have this contest all sewn up by Wednesday.
Are you all going to vote quickly, do you think?
Yes. Officially, still 3 weeks to press the flesh, but there could be only days to make a difference or the front runner to fall.
He does have this ability to electrify a room and to speak to people in a way that other politicians can't.
Quite frankly, to me, there's no contest. I've been at party conferences where you've had to queue 3 hours to get into the main hall to listen to what Boris has to say.
I'll be honest, I can't stand him at all. I worry about his competence.
Then he's my man.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to take the biggest risk of the campaign so far and actually stand on a chair.
Might he flirt with risk after all? There's chatter at least. Jeremy Hunt is the one gaining.
Boris is a bit of an ice cream sundae kind of sugar rush politician, says the right thing, he's great, very appealing, and he's a bit of a cheese sandwich, isn't he? He's kind of like very boring, but he actually has all the qualities you need.
Sadly, I think Hunt seems to have gone from kind of one place to another and back again. Can't quite decide whether he wants to be a sort of critic in the stands or a Johnson tribute act.
I would rather have someone who is dull but gets the job done.
If I think that Boris could do the job, could win an election and actually be a competent leader, then yes. If in the end I decide, after listening to a few more debates and so on, that he wouldn't, then it'll certainly be Jeremy Hunt. For the stability, for the common sense, I think.
So what's the tally in Canterbury?
Boris.
Boris. Undecided.
Hunt.
Hunt.
Boris.
Boris.
But sense and sensibility are both in play. Politics is rapture and reason. Tory members will make their choice, then leave us all with huge power in one person's hands. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Canterbury.
It's being heralded as a major boost for Britain's TV and film industry. The American streaming giant Netflix has signed a deal to take over much of the world-famous Shepperton Studios in Surrey to turn it into one of its major production hubs. Shepperton opened its doors as a film studio in 1932. Since then, it's been the home of hundreds of films, from Clockwork Orange and Alien to Star Wars and Bridget Jones. Here's our media editor, Amol Rajan.
Everyone knows the best place for a clandestine meeting in London is, and always has been, St James's Park.
Good Omens, based on the book by Neil Gaiman, is one of Amazon Prime's biggest ever productions, and it was made in Britain.
Crowley and Aziraphale have been meeting here for quite some time.
Co-produced by BBC Studios, the series is an example of how a few American web giants are transforming global television.
As if Armageddon were a cinematographic show you wish to sell in as many countries as possible.
How has Amazon's entry to the UK market changed things for a director like you?
I mean, in simple terms, there's more money to make things on a bigger scale. I mean, Good Omens being made as a 6.5-hour comedy with a standard UK budget, we couldn't get it moving. We've now got the resources to actually make a world that is credible to the audience and that engages with the story completely, and it's not just a pared-down adaptation.
Of course, it's not just Amazon. There is a creative boom going on in Britain, driven by SVOD, or subscription video on demand.
Take the photo.
Over the past 10 years, there's been an exponential growth in the value of the film and TV industry in the UK. And its growth has significantly outpaced that of the UK economy. TV today is marrying the best of the old with the best of the new. Shepperton Studios, owned by Pinewood, is where countless legendary movies were shot, and Netflix is moving in. They believe that by investing in local studio space and hiring local staff, they could neutralise concerns about American dominance of the industry. The new Netflix production hub will include 14 sound stages in a total of 435,000 square feet. No one in the history of film or television has caused so much disruption so quickly as Netflix. And the truth is, they're just getting started. The company is pivoting from an American distributor to a global production powerhouse deeply embedded in local economies. Rivals might grumble about the dominance of an overmighty Californian giant, but viewers aren't complaining. And anyway, that's showbiz.
That's why we invest so heavily here. That's why our original production in the UK is so big. This is about a $2.7 billion business, right, for the television market in the UK that we hope to be a bigger and bigger part of. So our productions have generated about 25,000 jobs already.
There's a revolution going on in Britain's creative industries, and this one will be televised. Amal Rajan, BBC News, Shepperton.
Let's take a look at some of today's other news now. And the UN Security Council has held emergency discussions on Libya after more than 40 people were killed in an airstrike on a detention centre. Most of those who had been held in the facility were African migrants. The Libyan government has blamed rebel fighters. The UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, says he's outraged. The last person to be stabbed in the London Bridge attack has told a court how police shot dead his 3 assailants mid-attack. Earlier, one officer told how he shouted at his colleagues to shoot the ringleader. Police investigating the disappearance of the estate agent Susie Lamplugh more than 33 years ago have begun searching an area of land outside Worcester following new information. The 25-year-old went missing from Fulham in southwest London in 1986 after meeting a client. Her body has never been found. England are into the semi-finals of the Cricket World Cup after beating New Zealand at Chester Street. Andy Swiss was watching the action.
Come on, Ella, it's the biggest game so far for England. Come on.
Don't let the smiles fool you. England fans arrived fearing their nerves were about to be seriously jangled. Beat New Zealand and they'd be through to the semi-finals. Lose, though, and their World Cup could be over. Pressure? Well, you'd hardly have guessed it, as England's batsmen got off to a blistering start. Jason Roy and Johnny Bairstow with a blaze of boundaries. Bairstow with his 2nd century in a row. A mammoth total seemed certain. But New Zealand clung to their catches and clawed their way back. England's final total of 305, still decent, but would it be enough? Well, the answer was soon clear. A spectacular catch from Jos Buttler, followed by the ultimate touch of luck. Mark Wood tipping the ball onto the stumps to run out captain Kane Williamson. The finger of fortune was pointing England's way as the wickets tumbled, including one for Ben Stokes with his very first ball. Fair to say he enjoyed that, and England certainly enjoyed this. A thumping win and a place in the last 4.
Well, it's been a bumpy ride at times, but England are through to their first World Cup semi-final for 27 years. And if they can reproduce this sort of form, well, anything is still possible. Andy Swiss, BBC News, at the Riverside, Durham.
The Netherlands have beaten Sweden 1-0 to go through to the finals of the Women's World Cup. After a goalless first 90 minutes, in extra time, the Netherlands were dominant and scored early on. They'll face the USA, who beat England in their semi-final in the final on Sunday. The 15-year-old American sensation Coco Gauff has breezed into the 3rd round of Wimbledon after beating former semi-finalist Magdalena Rybarikova in straight sets, proving her triumph over Venus Williams on Monday was no flash in the pan. But as Natalie Pertz reports, it wasn't such a good day for the Brits.
It's been a day of slip-ups, a stretch too far for Brits in the 2nd round. Heather Watson lost in straight sets, but things were looking brighter for Kyle Edmund.
Let's go!
The British number 1 was 2 sets up against Spain's Fernando Verdasco, with the match for the taking until his knee jarred and an old injury flared. And after that, he looked in real trouble, dragged into a dogfight, losing the next 3 sets. He said the knee wasn't to blame, which made this performance all the more puzzling. A kiss from dad before bedtime is usual when you're 15, but as night crept in, teen sensation Coco Gauff was about to raise the new roof on court 1. The first set was taken in her considerably long stride.
Just gets better and better.
But as fans went loco for Coco, she was the very picture of calm to break and then beat 2017 semi-finalist Magdalena Rybarikova.
I think I can beat anyone who's across the court, and if I don't think I can win the match, then I won't even step on the court.
Classy, composed, confident, Mum Candy has always known it. A star is born. Natalie Perks, BBC News, Wimbledon.
It's been called a magical place made by the people of Wales. St Fagans National Museum of History has tonight been named the winner of one of the most prestigious museum prizes in the world, the Art Fund Museum of the Year, after beating off 4 other museums across the UK. Our arts editor Will Gompertz visited all the contenders and sent this report.
5 very different cultural destinations were vying to be the Art Fund Museum of the Year 2019. But there could only be one winner, and it was St Fagans National Museum of History near Cardiff. It's a 100-acre visitor attraction boasting over 40 different Welsh buildings that have been relocated with extraordinary attention to detail to tell the story of the country's past. A major £30 million development has just been completed, which includes the creation of this Iron Age farmstead, made with the help of both visitors and volunteers.
Hi, my name's Anna Olshansky. I'm a volunteer at St Fagans, and I'm standing in the middle of an Iron Age farmstead called Brynero, and I help to lay the floor. It's all about recreating the past. I think we all have that feel inside that we want to step back in time, thinking about how people live their lives. I think that's really important.
To see all the museums on this year's shortlist requires a country-hopping tour, taking you from St Fagans in Cardiff to HMS Caroline in Belfast. The ship is the last remaining British World War I light cruiser still afloat, and the sole survivor of the Battle of Jutland. It is now a star attraction in a major dockside renovation which won the judges' approval for putting education at its heart. Across the water in Scotland is the V&A Dundee. Its striking architecture caught the judges' eye, while its contents have captured the imagination of many in the city.
I think the fact that the museum has always had young people at its heart really just allows people to come in and feel comfortable and enjoy and feel like it's their museum that they're coming to.
350 miles to the south is Nottingham Contemporary, a gallery celebrating its 10th anniversary with a Museum of the Year nomination for its commitment to contemporary art and diversity.
You can come in and you can do activities to do with, like we speak a lot about LGBTQ things going on, racial things going on, and there's always something to do.
The final finalist was the eclectic, eccentric Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. It is a remarkable treasure trove of human history, shortlisted for the enlightened way it's rethinking the presentation of its astonishing collection of over 500,000 objects that span from prehistory to the present day. But it was St Fagans in Wales that won the prestigious £100,000 prize for being, the judges said, one of the most welcoming and engaging museums anywhere in the UK. Will Gompertz, BBC News.
And that's it from us, a little later than usual. Good night.
Wherever you are, follow the story with BBC News. Use your smart speaker and ask for BBC News. Get headlines as they happen, with live updates. And if you're out and about, you can watch the BBC News channel live from the app. Follow the story, wherever you are, with BBC News.
As the contest to find a new Conservative Party leader continues,
we'll be at the heart of the story, following every twist and turn.
Right up to the moment a new leader is announced.
Stay with us for all the latest developments in the Conservative leadership contest here on the BBC News channel.
Stories set to shape the news agenda. Headlines, freshly written. Original perspectives on the day's unfolding narratives. See the bigger picture as it emerges. The Papers, weeknights at 10:40 and 11:30 on the BBC News channel.
Hello, you're watching BBC News with me, Sean Lay. It's 11:15. China and Britain have become embroiled in a heated war of words over the demonstrations in Hong Kong after the Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt warned of serious consequences for China if the rights of people living in the territory were infringed. Today, Beijing accused the UK of indulging in colonial-era fantasies and warned it not to interfere in its domestic affairs. Well, this evening